We're going to ask you to get back to your seats so we can get started with a very highly anticipated forum on housing and PCS moves. Thank you. Okay, first I have to say how excited I am that we're back on Facebook Live. Yay! So if you're watching us on Facebook, this is your definite time to make comments, post those comments. We'll get them up to our moderator and hopefully give you some answers while we're doing the forum. But if not, we will make sure to get back to you and you'll find some answers on that thread. So make sure that you're watching and sharing. I do believe that next to our Senior Leaders Town Hall, which will be this afternoon, this has been our most anticipated forum, and I'm very, very excited to be able to provide it for you. So just to remind, for the questions, we'll have questions on the mic, or if you want to just drop them down on cards, hold them up high. I will ask, because we're probably going to get an awful lot of questions, that you keep your questions short if possible. I know some of you might want to add a little bit of anecdotal information to the question, but it really is important that we give everyone the opportunity to ask questions, and that means shorter questions. So right now, I'm going to ask the panel to come on up to the table, and as I'm doing that, I will introduce our moderator. And our moderator, come on up, and you can come up this way if you'd like. Our moderator today is Lieutenant General Karen Dyson, United States Army retired. Yay! Lieutenant General Dyson currently is an independent director for Calibre Systems and also serves as the chair nominating and governance committee at USAA Federal Savings Bank. Lieutenant General Dyson was the first female officer to achieve the rank of Lieutenant General in the Finance Corps. That's pretty cool. And she retired from the Army in 2017. She's an amazing woman. She is also an AUSA Senior Fellow and is here in that capacity today. Please welcome Lieutenant General Dyson.
Thank you, Patty. I appreciate that nice welcome. And I want to thank everybody in here for being here and demonstrating by your presence the interest in this topic that we have for our forum today. I also want to thank AUSA for sponsoring this forum. I think through this forum and others on family support and quality of life issues, they have demonstrated their great interest in making sure that we bring to light the problems that are occurring out across our Army and our installations and allow our Army leaders to start working on those problems and find solutions. It's my honor to lead this forum today. Some of you who know me pretty well might think that I'm an unlikely candidate to lead this panel because I am a career officer, and in my own career I've had about 13 PCS moves, but I grew up as an Army child, the daughter of a Special Forces officer. I went to a different school every year up until high school, and each one of those was supported by PCS moves. And then in my own experience in housing, I don't really have that much experience. I've only lived in one set of family quarters, and that was the last assignment of my career. So I don't have a lot of experience with that. But what I do have is experience as a commander in the field of soldiers with families. And I can tell you that there's nothing more important to a commander than the well-being of that soldier and their families. And so I have a deep passion and interest for this topic. So I am indeed very honored to be here. Our forum today sits inside the context of AUSA's theme, which is America's Army Ready Now and Investing in the Future. Investing in the future is not only about the transformational programs that are going on, the big equipment that you see out on the floors here at AUSA, but it's also about our people. You're going to hear later from our senior leadership and the Chief of Staff, General McConville, who has made his #1 priority people, and he has outlined 5 quality of life priorities that include both housing and permanent change of station moves. The conversation around privatized housing and PCS moves has been very dynamic this year, starting with the congressional hearing in February to the Army IG investigation, the results of which were just released within the last month, and a campaign plan that garrison commanders and commanders across the Army have been working on to find and solve problems. PCS topics are also one of AUSA's top 5 things in the weekly update that they just sent out this week, And in that update, they noted that PCS moves constitute about 20% of the United States market for household goods shipment. Now that is really big business. It's under the responsibility of U.S. Transportation Command and is in an environment of a growing truck driver shortage that I know that the Army has been looking at. Bloomberg reports that the truck driver shortage is only going to get worse. They're expecting it to double over the next 10 years. So this is a big problem that the Army and all the services will be facing in the area of PCS moves. Now with that backdrop to what we're here to talk about, I'd like to briefly introduce the experts that we have on our panel. Starting first with Major General Michael Russell. I'll go from your left to right. General Russell is the Director of Operations for the Army G4, Army Logistics. General Russell commanded a sustainment command in Korea and is an expert in transportation. He served as the commandant of the transportation school where the Army builds transportation experts. Armed with his experience as a leader in complex environments and as a transportation expert, he's going to help us navigate the changes in household goods shipments. Next to him is Dr. Bob Steinroth. Dr. Steinroth is the Director of Plans and Resources in the Army G1, where he oversees future investments of the Army's military personnel manpower across active, National Guard, and reserve components. Excuse me. He's a member of the Senior Executive Service, and he knows how to garner and allocate resources to turn policies into actions. He's going to update us on the military personnel policies that govern PCS moves and associated entitlements that go with that. And then next to him is Major General Timothy McGuire, who is the Acting Commanding General of Installation Management Command. Installation Management Command delivers base support to 75 installations around the world. He's been there since about August of 2018, so he has experience in the uncovering of this problem. Family programs is one of their top priorities. General McGuire's leadership and command experience is quite deep as a warfighter in joint operations and in joint training space, and as the Deputy Commanding General in U.S. Army Europe. This gives him a very broad insight to the Army and makes him very well suited to talk to us about the Army Housing Campaign Plan, responding to the housing issues. And then lastly, Colonel Kristen Casteau is the Director of Public Health in the Office of the Surgeon General. She's responsible for public health policy, strategy, oversight, and advocacy across the Army. She has a doctorate in audiology and a PhD in industrial and systems engineering of human factors. Her experience includes leading operational readiness research and leading medical programs to enhance readiness across the Army. She will help us understand the Army's approach to health and safety concerns in the houses that are home to Army families around the world. So please join me in thanking our panel for being here today. There are cards on the table to capture your questions as we speak. So with that, General Russell.
Thank you, ma'am. I'm very happy to be here today, and I appreciate the kind introduction. But first, let me say this. You heard I'm the Director of Operations for the Army G4, and I've only been here for 2.5 months, having returned recently from Korea. One of the first things I was told is that you are going to be the household goods SME, subject matter expert, for the Army G4, reporting directly to senior leaders who far outrank you. So get ready, fix it. So what you hear from me today and my esteemed colleagues on the panel will be honest efforts on behalf of our Army senior leaders to fix my portion as household goods. So what I will say is, and I'll echo our moderator, the chief's priority, which is a strategy for people and their quality of life, household goods is centered right in the middle of that. And we have tried to do several things in order to immediately affect how household goods, that process is run, and then how do we improve your household goods experience. That is the charge that I received from our chief. Improve our people's household goods experience. So I'm going to cover just a few things to open up at least my portion on what we've done so far in order to improve your household goods experience. Now, mind you, There are many other things that we're working on, and you'll hear my panel members talk to some of those as well. And when we get to the questions and answers, I'm looking forward to going over all the detailed outcomes that we're looking forward to immediately and in the future. So first of all, one of the things that we are working on right now is to have our soldiers, which includes their families, their PCS orders in hand at least 120 days before they PCS. What that will do is that will allow them to better mediate their own timelines versus getting orders late to need and then having to work through issues with a very truncated time. Number two is maximizing the number of in-person household goods inspections and standardizing the inspection process. That's something that's been undertaken as well in order to make sure that we, because we're all customers of the household goods process, understand what to expect when movers show up, what the process entails, and then how do we leverage it on our own behalves. Number three, a smartphone application. There are numerous online sites that you can go to in order to find out what you need to do when you're pending a PCS move. However, the operative word was numerous. We're trying to streamline that to a one application resourced place you can go online, knowledge-based, that you can find out anything and everything you need to, versus having to scan the internet and multiple websites to find out what it is you need. And then fourth, this is something that has always been available, but what we found is that through lack of knowledge of certain joint JTRs, joint regulations and things of that nature, people are not aware of all of the benefits that they have. So for one is exception to policy on the 18,000-pound maximum limit on what you can move. There is an exception to policy available in the Joint Transportation Regulation, which if you put in that exception to policy to your transportation office, you can request to have your weight allowance, regardless of rank, up to 18,000 pounds. Now that's done based on potential hardships and things of that nature. Like if you have very large families, you have types of equipment and things of that nature that requires extra weight. So that is something that we found that a lot of people did not know and were not aware of. So those are just four things that I wanted to make you aware of in my opening comments. And then in closing, I just want to make sure everybody understands that our senior leaders, as well as us up here on the panel, we have listened to your comments online. We have heard your comments from the last AUSA family forums and on the Facebook family websites and other mediums. We've taken that and incorporated that into our efforts in the building and at other locations to try to get after what is most affecting you today, and then in the long term, get after what will make this process work better for us all. So thank you very much for listening to my opening comments. I'm looking forward to any questions on household goods. Thank you.
Good morning. Good morning. I'm Bob Steinroff. And last week, the Army senior leaders approved a change in Army's policy with respect to dislocation allowance, commonly called DLA. So moving forward, soldiers will be eligible to receive their DLA. They may elect to receive it in advance of travel and that entitlement, even if they currently have an individually billed account government travel charge card. It modifies a 2014 policy, Army policy, that directed that the government charge card would be used for all PCS travel and relocation expenses. The intent of that policy was to benefit the card holders where you had the convenience of having the charge card use, eliminate need to take money out of pocket, and reduce the need to apply for travel advances. So effective on the 10th of October when they signed that policy, that's when you'll be able to get dislocation allowance put into your regular bank account for that movement and alleviate some of the challenges that have been presented there. Thank you.
I'm Tim McGuire, and as was stated, I'm the acting commander of Installation Management Command. Prior to that, I was the deputy, and so I was in IMCOM when the housing crisis broke. And I was in this forum last year, and I would tell you some of the leading indicators that we were not delivering on the housing front were, in hindsight, present at this forum, but it really broke on 14 February of this past year, and I will tell you it was one of the more memorable Valentine's Day, and not for all the right reasons. But it's one here where it was a crisis because we broke trust with our soldiers and families. And I will tell you from the very top levels of the Department of Defense, everybody got that. And like armies do, we moved to friction, we moved to the sound of the gun. So initially it was a crisis and taking action to restore confidence. What did we do immediately? It was 100% visits by the chain of command to all 87,343 sets of privatized quarters. It was going out and establishing town halls. It was getting up hotlines. We wanted to make sure the communication was there. But as armies go in, a crisis will just win that particular battle. But we're in this for the long haul. And so the Army has developed a campaign plan. One, it coincided with on 1 March, Installation Management Command became part of Army Materiel Command. And General Perna, now as a 4-star senior Army leader, is responsible for all things installation readiness. I will tell you, having that 4-star advocacy has been powerful. General Perna does a monthly phone call with each one of the CEOs of the privatized partners to once again hold our partners accountable. And when I say where did the failure occur? Both the partners, both our RCI partners and the military took our eye off the ball. And this is one here where I assure you our eye is back on the ball. We established a common operating picture. So within our headquarters, General Perna's headquarters up to the Army staff, we have a common operating picture that looks at all 3 forms of housing. Privatized, which is really where the crisis started, but also Army owned, and also the barracks. General McConville and Secretary McCarthy, they made it very clear the #1 quality of life priority is housing, and we will get that right. It is one on part of the campaign. At the Army leadership level, it's about policy. And so we have been working on with our partners on strengthening the policy, the checks and balances that encourage, incentive fee structure, the new handbook, the Tenants' Bill of Rights. That is all being worked, and it's being worked at the Department of Defense level because our privatized partners also serve our other members of the joint team with the Navy, Air Force, and Marines. So we're getting one standard, but that standard, we're gonna hold our partners accountable for that. We've also embraced training, and with the training, our housing offices, and that's one I wanna make sure everybody's tracking. While there's a privatized housing office, we also have an Army housing office. Part of the problem was in some installations, they were co-located. We have physically separated that because we wanna make sure that everyone knows they have an advocate in the Army housing office. We've also gone through, brought everyone into MCOM headquarters for training. That training has also been each of our garrison commanders. I head out on Thursday to the pre-command course and speaking at every pre-command course, so the chain of command, the battalion and brigade leadership know their responsibilities. I will tell you the silver lining of the housing crisis is it re-educated all of us as the importance of the chain of command. So as I wind, I really look forward to the questions and answers period, but it's one there in terms of communication. We have hotlines at every one of our installations. We have apps for our privatized partners. We are developing an app so you can track your work orders for Army owned. The chain of command is all in. At some installations, we've reestablished the mayor's program within the housing areas, but you have your housing office, you have your chain of command, and you have your garrison leadership, and you have the hotlines. And the hotlines, we are checking to make sure they are properly manned 24/7. But it's one here where we want to hear. That said, we're doing 100% quality assurance of life, health, and safety work orders, 100% of between occupancy moves, and then 5% of other work orders. That one there is we are committed on the 100% between occupancy at places like Fort Leavenworth, at Fort Bliss for the Sergeant Major's Academy, and then also at Carlisle Barracks, where we have high summer return. We were not at 100%. We are conducting we have conducted after action reviews. We're going to get it right this time here. The good news at Fort Leavenworth, our privatized partners went and sent additional maintenance folks from other installations there so they could deal with the CGSC surge at Leavenworth. We're gonna make sure going into next summer, we do better. So this is one here where I can assure you, senior leadership is committed. I mentioned over 87,000 homes. It's one here where we want to be right 100% of the time. But I've got to be honest with you, there will be times where we're coming up short. When we do, that's where I encourage you to please reach out to the housing office, the Garrison leadership, or use that hotline so we can make it right. I look forward to your questions.
Good morning. Thank you for that introduction, ma'am. And I was relieved to hear that General Russell was a little uneasy about working with higher ranking officers. I kind of know how he feels right now. So the Office of the Surgeon General, the United States Army Medical Command, is fully committed to doing our part to address the Army's priority of providing safe and healthy homes for family members and service members. We are committed to the health and well-being of our beneficiaries and have done quite a few things to that end, and I'll talk about 4 specific. You can go to the next slide, please. The most significant, I think, thing that we've done in the past year, since the August 18 media articles about lead-based paint in family housing, we have, and then the subsequent February reports of primarily mold issues in homes, we've implemented 2 policies in Army medicine that really aren't anything that new, but they clarify Army medicine's roles in identifying health conditions that are potentially related to environmental health hazards in homes. They focus on the medical management, of course, of those conditions, the reporting as indicated by state and local authorities, particularly in the case of lead, and also tracking so that we can be aware of what's going on and linking that to the source of exposure. Both of these policies have given us a heightened awareness of what's going on. If you were at yesterday's Family Forum 1, I think it was, panel, Mr. Resta from the Public Health Center talked about the lead policy. Because we know exactly who's supposed to track everything and monitor everything, we know that since October of last year, 45 children have been diagnosed with elevated blood lead levels. We follow up on the source of the exposure to lead. We follow up on their laboratory analysis so we know when their lead levels go down below the action level. But it's a serious concern to us because, as Mr. Resta said yesterday, there's no safe level of lead in a child. We also know with our mold policy that both of those policies require a home assessment if the health condition warrants that. And in the past year, we've had 68 home assessments recommended from Healthcare Encounters that we follow up on to make sure that that information will get into our system of record for environmental and occupational exposures. Next slide, please. We've also established, in coordination with the Army Medical Readiness Assistance Program at Joint Base San Antonio, the Phase 1 of the Housing Environmental Response Registry. So this is a 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week hotline that residents can call to report environmental hazards in their homes, but also, and more importantly, to get assistance. They can get targeted education on the concerns that they have with the environmental exposure. They can request assistance from a public health professional at the Army Public Health Center and really get the information that they need to help them find a solution to their problem. Since the implementation of the registry in April, 236 families have registered, and about 110 have reported specific concerns with their home. The majority have been mold and dampness in the home. And then a proportion of that have requested assistance from a public health professional that we follow up on and track them. And they're enrolled in our system of record for environmental and occupational exposures as well. And the overall intent is to link the housing assessments with the health conditions or health concerns that result from those exposures. Next slide, please. We've also developed a whole suite of educational materials. The Army Public Health Center website, which is easily accessible, has a host of materials for housing residents. There are videos about lead and mold exposure, how to identify those risks and how to mitigate the risks, when you should contact a healthcare provider, and that sort of thing. There are materials for healthcare providers so that we can responsibly and in a validated way respond to concerns to environmental health exposures. There are checklists and links to Environmental Protection Agency and Housing and Urban Development materials for housing inspectors. And there are also, even for Army leaders, there are templates for town hall meetings where a lot of the background information is there and they can be customized. We have issued an order that we have public health, dental, and medical professionals at the town hall meetings that are happening on installations, so that those kinds of questions can be addressed by a professional there as well. Next slide, please. And then lastly, we are working with General McGuire's team to refine the housing between occupancy checklist to make sure that we are following all the legal and environmentally sound guidance, and that's been a great collaborative effort that we'll continue to work on. So I see that I'm out of time, so I'll stop. And thank you again for having me here. Look forward to your questions.
Well, I want to thank the panelists for getting us started here this morning. But now we're getting ready to go into the most important part of this forum, and that is to hear questions from you in the audience. And we have questions coming in on Facebook, online. So for here in the room, you've got the cards that are on the table. I've got some handed to me already, and there are some 6 roving microphones. So if you would like to ask a question, just raise your hand, and somebody will come along with a microphone. To get us started, I will kick off with a question that came in on Facebook. And the question is, or the statement, we need a clear process of how moving companies weigh our household goods. It seems like they're always overweight, and you don't always get the documentation that you need to establish that overweight status. So, General Russell, can you help us understand what is being put in place for the accountability of those weights that members may find themselves charged against if they're overweight?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. And that's a very good question, because weight is either your friend or your enemy at the end of the day. So how do you manage that? So when they pack your household goods at the pickup point, and they use all the packing materials and the crates and things of that nature, all of that is inherent weight. You should receive in your paperwork before they leave all the documentation, to include a copy of your GBL and things of that nature. And all of that paperwork you have to maintain, so that when you get to your destination, your gaining unit, and they deliver all of your household goods, they have to reconcile that. Now, there are weights that are taken. Before they come, they're supposed to weigh the truck to make sure that that is deducted. And then they also weigh that truck once they've picked up your household goods. And then the computation at the end of the day also subtracts out a lot of the dunnage, meaning packing materials, your professional gear, to include spouse's professional gear. That is also a new provision, up to 500 pounds, I believe it is. So all these deductions end up producing your net weight. And they're supposed to weigh that truck before it comes to you. If you dispute that, or you don't believe that your 3 crates equals 15,000 pounds, then you need to request another weigh. And then they will weigh that again. And what I will offer you is this. Once you receive that additional weight, if you still dispute that, please go back to your ITO. You do not have to accept it just on face value. If you're looking at 3 or 4 crates, and you know for a fact you left with 5,000 pounds, bought 1 kitchen table, and they said you have 10,000 pounds, you can dispute that. Do that, go to your ITO, go to your garrison, and I will guarantee you, based on the senior leaders that are very much focused on this, somebody will help you. And then we will get that taken care of. And then once all that's done, and it's settled, then we'll have whatever the weight truly is. And if you're over, we can work that as well. And if you're under, which I hope everybody is, then we'll move on from there. So that is generally the process.
Okay.
I just wanted to share a point on this. About a decade ago, we were afraid we were going to be overweight, so we requested a reweigh, and it came in about 1,000 pounds lower. And so my husband's acquisition corps, and he was like, fraud, waste, and abuse. They're building this weight in systematically. So ever since then, we have, every single time we've moved, we've asked for a reweigh. And we've never come in with less than 500 pounds less than the first weigh. So I just want to let you know that every time we move, and we've just moved 3 times in 3 years, we get a weight, we ask for a reweigh, and the reweigh is always a minimum of 500 pounds less. And I'm just letting you know, y'all are getting charged for that. We're getting charged for it.
Okay. Does anyone here in the room want to ask a question?
Just got a question here.
Let's go to a question in the room, please.
General McGuire, my question's for you. So I served about 30 years from 80 to 2010. In the 80s, when I lived in housing, DPW took care of all the maintenance and everything else, and that program seemed to work very well. If you had a problem and you called in a work order, they were usually there to fix it very quick. Then in the 90s, when I became a first sergeant and the installation started transitioning to privatized housing, a lot of those maintenance guys from DPW disappeared, and then we started having issues in the barracks to get stuff taken care of because that workforce wasn't on the installation, you know, and they were overwhelmed. So my question is there a thought of going back to the program that actually worked instead of the problem with the privatized housing that has brought on a lot of issues?
Well, I will actually come to the defense right now of privatized housing, because the flip side, just the rest of the story there, we were $20 billion underinvested in long-term maintenance of our housing also. So it's one here where we need to hold our partners accountable, and I assure you leadership at all levels is doing that. But privatized housing also has brought about the community centers, has enabled us to create a lot more new construction out there. And our partners since February have committed to over $500 million in additional investments here. So it is one on terms of the making sure they are responsive. Couldn't agree more, and we're gonna hold them accountable to do that. But it's when I was the commanding general down at JRTC in Fort Polk. I will tell you the housing was much better there because of privatized housing. That said, we've got to continue to push, and we got to make sure all partners, and we have 7 partners at 44 locations, and so we've got to make sure all are delivering. But that said, Fort Polk quality of life improved because we have the community centers there, which was one that we did not have beforehand. Reference the barracks. That is one here where I just want everyone educated, aware of the Army Barracks Management Program. This is one here where I do believe the silver lining of the housing crisis was it re-educated all of us of the importance of the chain of command. And that's why in the first 30 days, all commanders got out and visited his or her soldiers in their quarters to see if there were any issues. With the ABMP, as it goes, the chain of command's taking ownership over again of the barracks. And that's one here, making sure company commanders are signed for the property, and that non-commissioned officer, the backbone of our Army, are going out doing routine things routinely and checking to make sure their soldiers are living accordingly. And so that means company commanders are signing once again for the property. First sergeants are managing who lives in there, trying to work the unit cohesion there, so we can have good order and discipline in our barracks there. That said, DPWs, if it can't be solved at that individual level owner of that barracks, our DPWs are going to come down and be very responsive to that. And so that's one here where I think, and we have increased the number of housing inspectors out there, because that was one where we took too much of a cut. And so we were authorized to hire additional housing inspectors on the privatized front to make sure we are doing quality assurance inspections. Like I said, 100% of life, health, safety, 100% of between occupancy. So I think we acknowledge, and we're looking hard. The Army, just some stats on the barracks. We spent over $940 million in the last 2 years to get after barracks. And the Secretary-in-Chief, or General McConville, very committed to fixing our barracks. So we have another $2.5 billion projected over the next 5 years. With that, our DPWs and the Corps of Engineers will be tied in to make sure we've got the proper supervision to make sure that's done to standard.
Okay, thank you. We've got a question coming in from Facebook from Kristen Smith. A resident at Fort Bragg had independent verification of unhealthy level of mold in their house. So they were offered the opportunity to move to another home, but they were not offered any remediation for their household goods, and nor were they offered assistance with the move. They would have had to pay for it personally because the move was for personal reasons. So what systems are being put in place now to make sure that the policies are connected between housing and PCS moving, so that if it's a health and safety welfare issue, that it's not put on the service members' shoulders to pay, bear the cost of that move? I'm not sure whose that is for.
I'll go ahead and take that. On the policy front, where once again, we're looking at, one, that is where we are trying to really pinpoint the standards there for what is at risk. I will tell you, we monitor for displacement on our common operating picture, our COP. We know the total number of folks that are displaced. The folks that are displaced, our partners are in large measure providing them per diem while they're displaced if it's true life, health, safety. That one here is one on the, not knowing the specifics here,
Yeah.
is one that, once again, my default is, if you're in that situation, please ensure your chain of command is aware and the garrison leadership, so we can elevate it and get all the details. So I'm hesitant to speculate on this one because I don't know the details, but looking at the Army staff here in the Secretariat, I know on the policy front, when these issues come up, boy, we're taking a hard look, and that's where we want to do right by our soldiers
So I
and
think,
families.
maybe looking at this a different way, are there changes being made to briefings that are provided to soldiers and families when they move on to an installation or throughout their town halls that make them aware of these issues, and also make the local leadership aware of the related issues? There's another question that came in from a card here that is somewhat related, and it talks to how you would tie inadequate maintenance in thermostats, for example, to mold in Army family housing, and making that, replacement of the thermostat is a higher priority if it ultimately leads to, mold growing. So kind of bringing together those pieces. Is something changing in the way communication will be affected to service members and their families?
No, that's very, and Joe McConville has tasked us to transition from industrial age to information age. And this is one here where I mentioned the apps that we are trying to work to track the work orders. We need to do a better job of, on our websites, making sure the accessible. Christy mentioned we are trying to streamline our quality assurance checklist, so everybody is going off one standard across the entire Army. We are working hard to, and this is one here where we want to be a learning organization, like our combat training centers. We're conducting after-action reviews so we can get it right. But this is one here on our fact sheets. So much of mold, as General Dyson mentioned, is making sure we get at the root cause, which is the moisture or the, on that, we'll take a look at the thermostats. I would argue if the thermostat's not working, that should be getting the attention to fix it. But
Right.
If it's life, health, safety, if we can get after the root cause, we want to make sure we are attacking that, because it's going to save us bigger problems down the road.
Yeah, I think maybe, the criteria that's used for health and safety, you
Yeah.
might not on the surface of it, if you're in a mild climate, think that thermostat is that big of a deal, but, but
No,
it
you're
might be, it might be. Okay, is there another question in the room? Somebody wants to ask a question live here?
Yeah, I'm a specialist in environmental air quality measurement, and on a daily basis I field a lot of calls from concerned folks who are worried about air quality in the home, but also not caused by contaminants in the home, but also caused by external events, which could be dust, forest fire, smoke events and such. And there's a lot of really valuable, interesting technology coming onto the market to be able to evaluate these problems. And I'm just curious as to what forward thinking is occurring to look at some of these technologies and potentially deploy them.
I can take that one. Thank you for that question. So our Army policy in terms of indoor air quality related to mold specifically is that instead of focusing efforts on the mold spores in the air, if you will, looking at instead the conditions that lead to moisture and humidity and dampness in a home that provide favorable conditions for mold spores to proliferate. So right now, our focus in our policies is for mold to remove any clean thoroughly, and there are procedures for cleaning thoroughly any visible mold and addressing the source of moisture that allowed that mold to proliferate, and then keeping, in terms of indoor air quality, temperature, humidity, and dew point at levels that align with Housing and Urban Development EPA guidelines. We follow closely we're gearing towards following closely the standards suggested by the National Center for Healthy Housing.
Okay, thank you. I've got several cards here that really talk to household goods shipments, General Russell, and they really deal with not knowing what the service provider is supposed to provide. What is that mover supposed to provide? One question talks about not knowing about a $500 immediate damage claim that they have the empowerment to do. One talks about not knowing whether or not the movers can unpack your goods at your household, and and then there's another one that really talks about how uncomfortable it is dealing with the movers when you're trying to understand what they're supposed to be able to do and the service that you actually get. So let me boil those into one question, which is, how are you improving communications with family members and service members on what their entitlements are, and then following up to, as part of your accountability with the moving companies on the service that's been provided?
Thank you, ma'am. So that's a good question. And what I would tell you is this. Some of the things that we found is there is a lack of knowledge in general with our service members and their families, to include my own. Because before I received this task, there are a lot of things that I did not know that were available to me. So, for example, the $500 immediate settlement that you can do on site, that does exist. There are two different types of claims process. One is the defense claims process that Transcom handle, and then there's an Army process that the Office of the Judge Advocate General Claims Department, they handle. The movers, they are required to unpack. But what we found is a lot of families choose not to do that because the movers make you believe that they're basically just going to turn the box upside down and dump it on the floor. So you don't want that. I know my wife, who's sitting over there, does not want that because I did that once. And don't do that. Please don't do that. I thought it was a good thing. So there are a lot of I would say, household Bill of Rights. There are a lot of rights and expectations you should have. So what I would ask you is your empowerment. And one of the things that we're going to get after is making sure everybody understands how to empower themselves and take back the household goods move. It is not the movers that we are accommodating. Sometimes you feel that way. They are accommodating us. If you ask them to do something because that is how you prefer it to be done, then they should do that. A lot of instances, you have a lot of antiques. You have furniture that you don't destroy. You have children's things that you're saving for the grandkids. All these kind of issues that we all have, and you ask the movers to do a certain type of packing or handle it this way, and they make you feel as if you're inconveniencing them. You are not. We pay millions of dollars that one young person stated back there for them to pack our items, our perishables, the things that you cannot get again in this lifetime. So we are going to put all of those issues on one site, one app, because what the goal is when you're in the middle of your move and you have boxes all around you and you have people on every floor and you're either by yourself or you've dispersed your family to try to cover each room while you have people going through all of your belongings, you have to be able to go and look and say, this is what I need right now based on what's going on. Or the movers are not doing what I asked them to do, what I was briefed they would do at my either levy briefing or what I gotten offline, and then you call the ITO. There are 24-hour, 7-day-a-week hotlines. Somebody will answer. And then somebody, based on what AMC is doing in terms of increasing inspectors, and oh, by the way, we've even hired spouses to do some of these inspections and training them. People will respond, and they will come out there and resolve the problem. And if not, then you continue to elevate it. because we stay up here, Army senior leaders. They have empowered all the way down to the lowest levels to make sure that your household goods experience is better and gets better. We just have to hold everyone accountable. And then finally, improving communications. To improve the communications between us and the movers is a combination of all the things that you've heard thus far, and it even has to do with a future possible contracts that we're going to do that Transcom is working on, where we're working on other issues to hold movers accountable individually if they don't do what's expected. So those are some of the things that we're trying to get after. Thank you.
So General Russell, has there been any thought given to creating an app that is similar to the one that is available for tracking vehicles and shipment, for being able to track your household goods and shipment, so you can have better tabs on where your household goods are en route?
Actually, there has been. So I say this not to overpromise and underdeliver, but we have talked about, is there a possibility to, and this goes back to the industry, and we'll have to work with our partner Transcom, is there a way to incentivize the movers to put tracking systems and track our household goods from when it's picked up to when it is delivered to our quarters or home or wherever it is? So we have looked at that. That is something that we are considering to pose through Transcom to the moving industry, and I believe it does have merit, and we're going to keep attempting to pursue that.
I mean, that might be another way to capture feedback from, our families as they're going through their move, on their satisfaction with their move.
Ma'am, if I could, for feedback, the surveys are critically important. I know service members, we get inundated with surveys. But when you get your household goods survey that comes back to you to your email account, please fill it out, because we actually count each one. And that is a way that we measure the effectiveness of each moving company. And that rank orders them that you can look at on the DPS website. So those surveys are very critically important. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I've got a question here coming in from Facebook. It talks about the town halls that have been conducted over the summer in response to the housing crisis and the campaign plan. And many of the garrison commanders have said that they have open door policies. However, this member who's writing in is stating that they're finding that not always to be true. So, General McGuire, what are you doing as the acting Installation Management Command commander to hold your garrison commanders accountable for making sure that there's ample opportunities to hear from residents in Army housing on issues?
Okay, a great question. And I just look out to everybody. I can assure you, if there's an issue, please bring it to both your soldiers' chain of command, but also the garrison. And as I mentioned, there is the Army Housing Office is another venue. There is the hotline. And then you can bring it once again to the garrison commander and get how to hold them accountable. There are monthly reports that they are sending up. As I mentioned, General Perna has a monthly phone call with all 7 CEOs, where he's personally taking. General Perna is a very busy man with 10 subordinate commands out there, but he's taken the time last 2 days of duty days of the month to call each one of the partners there. That's where we arm him with issues. So this is one here where if you're not satisfied, please get into the hands of the leaders there. That said, the garrison commanders, I'm proud of how they're taking this one on, and in large measure, they are committed to regaining your trust. And so this is one here on the town halls. We're going to continue those into the foreseeable future. We're going to make sure we not eliminating it to housing, because we want to make sure we're doing the right thing on household goods. We want to make sure it's a venue where we can talk child care and spouse employment also. So it's one where we want them to be interactive. But that's one here where if you do not feel that your garrison leadership is being responsive, folks can contact me. But it's one here where I am confident folks will get it, but it's one where if they're not, please, that's what the chain of command's for. So I'd love to hear. But it's one where we want to hear the issues because the spotlight is on. And when General McConville sent his message to the force and made it clear the people are the #1 priority and issued his 5 quality of life, it's not lost that housing was #1. and we want to make sure we're doing right by that.
Hey, Tim, let me add, if you're not getting satisfaction from your garrison commander, contact your senior commander.
Yeah,
Only escalation.
great point. Thanks, John.
Okay, if you didn't hear that, the comment was if you don't get satisfaction from your garrison commander, to make sure that you reach out to the senior commander on the installation. Okay. Let's go here to the front and then to the back.
This is a household good question. For the first time, we received a number of things from long-term storage or non-temp storage that were not ours. And as the driver started unloading and we're like, no, he said, well, do you want it? And we said, no, of course not. Fortunately for us, it wasn't keepsakes or mementos. It was just standard furniture. But he said, well, I'll give it to you. And we said, no, but we reached out to a couple Facebook pages and we took pictures and we posted. It was one of the, I think, Lost During Your PCS Facebook page. And there were no takers because it's only a certain number of members on this Facebook page. But is there a way going forward with this app to allow family members who do unpack and find things that are not theirs, like memory albums that mean the world to us as we move around, to somehow get back to their owners?
Ma'am, I appreciate that question. I really appreciate that question because my wife and I inherited 2 chairs that we have no idea where they came from. And that came out of non-temp storage. So we're trying to work through that as well. However, I'm glad you brought that up because we had not discussed that topic specifically. But now that you've brought that up, it now will be a part of that knowledge base app. Thank you very much.
Okay, in the back, please.
Hello. Is this on? Okay, yes. I'm Erin Wagner. I'm with Military Officers Association of America. And I know the Army's been doing a lot to improve the work order tracking and portals, but we have heard some reports from service members on the barracks side that this isn't necessarily the case for all barracks of having a formalized work order process. And so we see some chain of commands creating their own process with Google Docs. And so I was just wondering what is being done to improve the work order process on the non-privatized side, and if you could go into what sort of tenant rights the service members would have living in barracks.
One, in terms of the app, Army Material Command is on behalf of the Army creating an app to track work orders both with Army Family Housing and also on the barracks. So acknowledging we're working that one. In terms of the rights there, the same in terms of living private, a quality place that you would want your son and daughter living in. So we want to make sure it's safe, it's secure, and something that America's Army should be proud to live in. But that said, also they are members of a unit, and so in terms of chain of command, there are still going to be first sergeants, squad leaders, team leaders coming in to inspect to make sure they are upholding their end and maintaining their room accordingly. So in terms of I'll just camp it in the good order and discipline, but it's one where I'm very confident in terms of the chain of command does a good job with that, and that's why I'm excited about the Army Barracks Management Program, the chain of command doing the routine things routinely. And it is one that we spent a lot of time in the 82nd Airborne Division. We always said you can't issue physical and mental toughness at green ramp, meaning you can get your MREs, you can get your hot weather gear, cold weather gear as you're getting ready to get on the plane, but you got to do PT every day to be physically and mentally tough to fight and win the nation's war. I will say the same with good order and discipline, and that's where the chain of command involvement in the barracks, it's teaching our junior non-commissioned officers how to lead. It's also with staff duty officers teaching, that's where Second Lieutenant McGuire learned what it was to lead and learn more about interacting with my soldiers. And so that's where I think just goodness comes from having the chain of command involved in all aspects of their soldiers' lives.
So I'll come to you next. I just want to follow up because this is very related. A question from Facebook from Renee Howell. With privatization of housing, is the chain of command allowed to do health and welfare inspections in homes? I've got a couple of related questions here. In homes, and then bring the resources in to help the families if needed. What's the process to get a resource team? to come in to help families? And is there a different policy at each garrison, or is there a standard Army policy?
No, there's one standard Army policy, and this is one here, and this is one of the misperceptions. That when we took our eye off the ball, there became the myth that, hey, the chain of command cannot enter into privatized housing. If it's life, health, and safety, going back to good order and discipline, the chain of command can and needs to. Because if we are talking life, health, and safety, it's an emergency. And so we need to go in and check on our soldiers. Now, the second on that is a routine visit is more in terms of if it's not life, health, safety, is being smart in the consent and need to come on by. But we want to have that interaction. And that's one of the ones where I say, once again, the silver lining of the housing crisis was our squad leaders, our team leaders should know about his or her soldiers and where they're living if they have issues. So in terms of can we enter? Yes, we can, life, health, and safety. It's one there where, and that's where, once again, if you're having an issue, boy, who better to go down and help you with that than the chain of command. So I would encourage tenants to reach out, hey, boss, I'd like you to come on by and see. So one, we can and we will. It's one there where I'm part of this is once again the good partnership there. That's why the quality assurance visits are so important for us, is getting DPW down to make sure our partners are doing things to standard. But the chain of command can and needs to get in there, in particular on the life, health, and safety.
Thank you. Ma'am?
This is to go back actually to previously with the PCS and items showing up that aren't yours or, missing. And the page actually is lost during my PCS, and it's monitored. It's very respectful, and it really is simply just to, there's 24,000 members right now, and you can't share, but you can screenshot and then share social media. So when we moved here a year ago, a little over a year ago, some items actually were missing from our move that we couldn't replace. They were my late husband's items. And we put it, somebody told me about this page, we put it there, it was shared, military.com did an article on it, and then, after my husband had called every day for 25 days, the organizations that laid hands on our move across the country, within 15 hours it was found. So the power of social media as military spouses and military families during those PCS moves is huge. And so I say utilize it. 25 days and then 15 hours later, we had our stuff, so.
Well, and I would suggest if that many family members are using social media in this way, monitoring it from within the leadership that are putting policies in place and implementing actions, to get things fixed, would be very helpful as well.
But also be mindful of being respectful about it. Right. Going on social media, bashing, the military or the movers or, people aren't going to take that and share that. So if you're really reaching out and saying, we've lost some things, we understand it's a crazy process, I need help finding it, as opposed to, being disrespectful, so.
Right. Okay. Is there another question in the room? Yes, ma'am, here in front.
Just looking at your flyer.
Yeah, we need here in front.
I have a question.
Oh, I'll get to you next, okay?
So I'm looking at this flyer that was on the table, the ABCs of claims, and I just finished my claim before coming here. And I thought that, I went to the move.mil website, which took me to the ATS, and then took me to the DPS, or 3 websites down, and then I put on all my claims and pictures, and I hit submit claim, and I thought, okay, I can go to AUSA because I'm done. And then I see here it says note on the very bottom, transferring your claim to CPCS on the DPS website, move.mil, does not transfer the electronic file. You must go to this other JAG-CNET /P claims to complete the online filing process. Like, what does that mean? And that was not in my instructions.
Yeah.
So, thank you for that soft curveball. Appreciate it. So what I would say is this, and then for those of you who like pop culture TV, I'm going to phone a friend. So number one, there are two processes. It's the DPS where your claim goes to Transcom to be settled, and then there's one where it goes to the Army, which our JAG office claims handles. And they do different things. So what I would ask is this: if General Ware or Mr. Rick Marsh could talk to Transcom's piece to get after your DPS, and then if I could have Major General Risch, who's the deputy JAG, who can handle the Army's claims piece, and maybe we can reconcile.
Hey, General Russell, this is again, this is Major General Mike Ware on behalf of General Lyons at Transcom. I just want to thank you and General Gamble for the chance to be part of this. And you are really hitting it out of the park with each of those answers. I will tell you that this type of feedback is exactly what's needed in terms of fixing the process. You know, there is a global household goods contract that is soliciting feedback, and we're building a better process. But this example that you brought up is so bad, we can't wait for that. So literally, I mean, it is a fractured system, and this is just a great example of how you're just getting tossed from one level to the next. I'm not just going to phone a friend. I actually have a great friend here, Rick Marsh, who's the SES with me in Transcom, and he is the one that is trying to help us fix this now. But I'm going to pass the mic. But I'm here to take any questions you've got on that future contract that we're putting together as well. So Rick, let me hand this over.
Hey, ma'am, so specifically for your question, when you filed your claim in DPS, so you will work now with the transportation service provider that moved you. So you only need to follow this clunky process if you can't come to an agreement with the TSP and have to go to the military claims office. So ideally you wouldn't have a claim at all. Ideally now you'd be able to reach an acceptable agreement with the mover, and you would not have to go through this process. Right? No, it's good feedback. But to General Weir's point, there's about a 20% claims rate in the program. 400,000. There's about 80,000 people who have to go through this process. So to General Weir's point, I mean, this is not something we want to wait on to fix. So that's great feedback.
So General Weir, and I'm sorry I didn't get your name, but thank you for jumping in on this and recognizing how important this is. I mean, conflicting information, confusing information. Everybody's trying to navigate it, and during a very stressful time anyway. So I think this sort of falls in the bucket too of clarifying information to family members and service members on, what is the process for the move, what are these steps, and so that it's clear where there's a separation. Thank you. Okay, question in the back.
My question is in regards to movers, a little different area with safety. So when we moved to Fort Leonard Wood, we lived outside of base. Our movers, the truck driver, picked up random people in Licking, Missouri, where the prison's located, to come move my household goods into my home. And as we saw the unfortunate incident with the Army civilian in Germany, and his movers ended up attempting to rob him and harm his family. What are we doing to make sure that the movers, especially off base, are not convicted felons, or at least even being tracked of who is coming into our families' homes?
So I'm going to and I'm going to attempt to answer that based on a little bit of experience, having dealt with a little bit of that as well. There are several things that the mover is supposed to abide by. Trained individuals, enough equipment, trolleys, ropes, and things of that nature to perform the move as they're being paid for and that they bid for. So what I would ask you is this: we don't know who they're hiring per se, because they show up. Just like to my house, your house, Private Russell's house, they show up. But what I would ask you is, if you notice anything that is askew, please report that. And always, if anyone feels unsafe, then I would tell you just call the MPs or anyone like that if you immediately feel that you may be at risk. But if it's not something to that level, call the ITO office or that 24/7 hotline, and they will come out there. they're required to come out there. And matter of fact, they're required to do, at least by OSD's rules, at least 50% inspections. And AMC is getting after that, especially in terms of empowering folks at the lowest level to be on site, inspect where it's needed to make sure that you're getting the service that's required. If you feel unsafe or you're not getting the move that you believe you should have, report that to the inspector that comes, because there is no more coming by, dropping off a card saying, "You're good," as they do a slow drive-by, and then you're like waving, hoping that, that the card, doesn't land somewhere else. Now they have to get out, come in, they have a checklist that they're required to use, and ask to see that checklist. As a matter of fact, I brought a copy of it with me, just in case somebody called me out on it. So ask to see that checklist and make them go over the checklist with you. And then, if you do not still feel that this is right, call them out on it and make them fix it. Now, what the result is, it could mean your move moves to another day, or they send everybody away and start over again. That happened to me one time. The movers were similar to what you've experienced. And it got to the point to where the inspector came out, my wife and I said, "Hey, this is just not working." I mean, they were doing whatever they wanted to do. And we threatened to cancel the move and have somebody else come out and redo the move. The inspector fixed it on the spot. So those are just some of the things I would offer to you. But again, the inspectors have checklists, make them use them, make them show them to you, and if it's not going the way you think it should and you feel unsafe, emergency services first, ITO second, and we'll fix it.
So General Russell, you've mentioned the hotline, the 24/7 hotline a couple of times. Is that available on joint bases and across other services bases, like an Air Force base, if you're moving to an area like that?
Yes, ma'am. 1-833 MILMOVE, MILMOVE. It's a 24/7 hotline.
Okay, great. Thank you. Yes.
Okay. Good morning, sir. I think, good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Sir, I think it's great that you're providing the information that we did not get when we do our initial move. But I will tell you, I came out of Kentucky, and just piggybacking on what that young lady said, the exact same thing. I submitted my move in the requisite number of days that I thought it would require. They came back, the movers, and said, "No, we're going to do 4 days, and then we'll move you." Well, it ended up going over the weekend. We called the inspector. No one came out because there's a shortage, I think, on the installation of inspectors to come out during a high peak season to be able to look at your individual actions that's happening within the household, and then to go to everyone else. So one, we had an issue with inspectors and did not get in one. It ran into the weekend. No one was available to come. And so we ended up going over almost 7 days for them to pack us out. We had the worst move in 26 years, which happened to be our first door-to-door move in 26 years of service, sir. And I will tell you that it's a challenge. It's a challenge for, I think, the family members to be able to push this household goods issue up the hill when it comes to contractors. Kentucky is extremely short, and so when you do not have individuals that they can hire to come and do the household goods piece for you, it becomes even more challenging. We end up losing a lot of money out of pocket because now we gave notice, depending on the amount of days that we think would take us out of our home, we end up having to stay longer. And so there's this additional cost that's not added into all of the stressors into moving. We have very, very poor contractors out there. Who holds them accountable in spite of the fact we complete the surveys and we said these guys should not be moving anyone, and they're the next set of people moving? And so who holds them accountable for the lack of care and just the way that we're treated during this household good movement time frame? Thank you.
So I appreciate the passion behind that question, because I'm sure it's not just you alone. So what I will try to attempt to answer that in two parts. First part is, how do we hold them accountable? And I know I've said survey, right? But the survey allows us to rank order their progress and how well they're doing. And there is a process where they can actually be, I guess, barred from being a mover. Now, they have found workarounds. Now, I'm not saying this for the industry. I'm saying there are bad actors. They have found workarounds where they'll just rename themselves, or they'll go to another region, because this is a transaction. I know, right? This is I'm just reading your body language, I know. Because it's a transactional process. Today, it's a transactional process, and they'll just move. So how do we try to clean up issues where they find the loopholes and exist in between them, and we have instances where family members feel unsafe during a move, and or the quality of the move is just so poor, it becomes just an additional stressor. So what I would do now is I would like to segue into the global household goods contract, because I think this is a good opportunity for Transcom to talk to how they're trying to clean up this industry and go from a transactional process to something that's more centralized. We're not going to take our eye off the ball, but more centralized to where we can get after bad actors and improve your experience. Thank you.
No, thanks, Michael. And you're absolutely right. If I knew what I knew now over the past 34 years, I'd be shocked. I'd be doing a Diddy all the time. But it is very, very fractured. And what I did not realize is that while you'll have a poor move, and some of this is due to peak season, some of it is bad actors, but we do not have a system that takes a West Coast poor performer and prevents them from behind on the East Coast. It is fractured. And part of this global household goods contract is to get after just that. Literally with one move manager to be able to track the performance of all the TSPs, these are the transportation service providers, the movers, and understand what their performance is. And the other thing it does is it allows us to have an investment made so that we have more capacity during the peak seasons. Those are the two main ingredients, but the key is accountability, and it does not exist today. It's a fractured system, there's no doubt about that. But by the summer of 21, that is exactly what's going to happen if all goes well with the award of this contract. I don't want to underestimate, though, the value of your feedback, because we've got another peak season to get through, the summer of 20, and this is incredibly important, and all of you bring that to bear. I'm incredibly proud to be part of the Army, but you literally are leading the way with feedback, and that's what we need. Thanks.
So, General Ware, can I follow up?
Absolutely, ma'am.
I've got a card from the audience here that relates to this, and it really talks about the truck driver shortage. I mean, you're talking about putting mechanisms in place, but that's really not going to solve the truck driver shortage across America. So are you looking at any incentives to encourage another way to move, and then maybe correlated to what General Russell is talking about, the orders being issued 120 days out? That gives you predictability, but it doesn't solve your peak move season. So, you know, are there any things being looked at to maybe stagger moves differently somehow? And that might be an Army question, not sure, but go ahead.
Man, that's a great question, and we equate it to, you know, we're not going to move Christmas just because it's hard. I mean, literally, what's happened is the inability for industry to invest and grow a larger force because it's so fragmented when we contract at different levels, the transactional nature. And what happens with the global household goods contract is that a company can invest and know that they've got the business and they can move the trucking, for example, the shortage of drivers. They can invest in getting more trucks and more drivers to enable it to be used in different locations. It is a much better, we deserve much better. And this gives us that visibility that we have at the palm of our hand now with applications. You can see it, and that's exactly what we'll be able to do.
If I could, for the Army, so today, because a lot of us are moving, matter of fact, just moved and came here. So today, what can we do? What relief do we have? So personal property moves. I would offer you this. Those are available. We used to call them Diddy moves. Take advantage of them, because we are looking at ways to incentivize our people to do personal property moves. Because when we took a look at the aggregate of folks that move, and the surge season is between May and August, the chief has said we're not going to move people outside of when they want to move. He's made that clear. So how do you smooth a process out naturally versus forcing folks to move outside of when they need to? Because everyone has, you know, people who have families want to move their kids at a certain time. Normal cycles of assignments are in the summer or sometimes in December timeframe, et cetera. So how do we get after that? Personal property moves, things such as hiring your own truck, opportunities to go out and solicit your own movers, and take 3 bids and find out what's the best bid and submit that, and then you're allowed to do your own moves. Certain amount of reimbursement that may come to you for that personal property move based on whether or not you want to do that or do a full cost move. So there are a lot of options. I don't want to take away too much from the G1 and others whose this is part of their portfolio, but there are options out there that you can do today to offset when you want to move versus the lack of trucks, the lack of personnel, and other things. My wife and I did a move on our own once. It took a long time, and my sons hated me for it, but we did our own move. And it worked out okay. But not everybody can do that, you know, et cetera. So I just offer that to you versus what's coming with the Global Household Goods Contract.
Okay, unfortunately, we are out of time. I've got a lot of questions here, and I saw a hand up back there. If you want to write your question down and bring it forward, I think we are committing to answering all of the questions that we've received here and on Facebook. We've got quite a few Facebook questions here. I also want to highlight for everyone that there is a senior leader panel this afternoon with our new Secretary of the Army, the Chief of Staff of the Army, and the Sergeant Major of the Army. This will be the second panel held this year. The first one was in February, and in February that panel had over 500 different stations dialing into it. So clearly there's a lot of interest here, and I just want to thank everyone for speaking up, for speaking out, for providing these senior leaders with this kind of feedback. You know, the first start to making something better and to making an improvement is to identify the problem and then start building the solution collaboratively, working with all the right stakeholders. So I really thank you all for your participation this morning and allowing us to have this discussion. So please join me in thanking our expert panelists.
It's not right here. It's not right there.
So this panel was incredibly helpful, and I hope we can do more of it. I'm going to just ask you, I know you're all getting ready to leave, but just real quick, because we're going to have our senior leaders town hall starting at 3 o'clock, it's going to be a packed room, so try to come a little early. But I want to take this opportunity to thank everybody that worked on these forums the last 9 months. So let me just thank everyone, especially G9, especially Larry Gilchrist, especially Thea Green, who's on my staff, for all of the hard work. And we will see you back here at 3 o'clock.